All right, what is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the Mets Weekly Podcast as we are live at this very moment on YouTube and on X to discuss the latest news and rumors all spring training long in Mets land. But before we get into that, I want to remind everyone to subscribe to the Mets Weekly YouTube channel for weekly episodes of our show that are now recorded live every Monday night, typically at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. For those of you watching or listening on playback, you want to join the conversation in the future, make sure to turn on those post notifications to know when we go live. For those of you in the live chat right now, we're letting you know we love reading your comments, your questions, your concerns. You feel like you're being ignored, you're not being ignored. We're just going to star them throughout the show. We'll try to pull up as many as we can to keep the flow of the conversation going. Make sure to follow Mets Weekly on X and on TikTok for future content over there. For our audio listeners, make sure to follow us on all of your favorite listening platforms to not miss the audio version of new episodes that go up at 9 a.m. the following day. And also make sure, be very nice and give us a 5-star review if you can. That would be greatly appreciated. And of course, for those of you in here or watching on playback, you want to be a part of our show in the future or live on air, call into our brand new 24/7 hotline with questions, comments, etc. 845-208-5677 and leave a message that we prefer to be under 3 minutes long. Please refrain from using any offensive and or derogatory language and keep it Mets related. All calls will be pre-screened for obvious reasons, and numbers will be blocked if you violate any of these rules. It is a one-strike policy. Mets fans, we want to hear what you have to say. Give it your brutal, honest opinions, just like we do every single week. 845-208-5677, and you could be featured at the end of tonight's show. That's 845-208-5677. 5677. So without further ado, let's get into episode number 117. Now, it is quite the ride that we have been taken on so far in spring training. It always is with the New York Mets, news flowing like crazy with, of course, our first exposed part of baseball season. It is fresh. The problem here is that I feel like we do have a little bit of panic as well, of course, with the nervousness of a lot of fans. So maybe I settle a little bit of that down. I have a little bit more concern for some than others, of course, with some of the injuries going on here. But it is just me today. So if I am your least favorite co-host of the three of us, you are out of luck today. But I'm just here to give you the input of what I'm seeing so far in spring training. I'll hear from you guys in the comments. And speaking of the comments, I will get into you guys in the chat as well. Carlos is in the chat. Ortiz and Ramos also in here. Shout out to everyone in here. Make sure to hit the like button if you have not already. And of course, we will get into a lot of different topics. We have plenty to discuss going on right now in spring training. And a lot of talking for me and just me. So we'll see if we get to that 2-hour threshold. We do have a game that is coming up at 6 o'clock. Kodai Senga is expected to make his spring debut today. And then a bunch of other major league set pitchers as well following after him. He's only going to give 1 inning. Obviously, them taking it slow with the injury-riddled season that he had last year. But speaking of pitching, I do want to start off with the most positive that has come from the pitching, and that is the young department of the pitching, and that being pitching prospect, number 1 Mets prospect, Brandon Sproat, who we did get a first look at, his first ever start in big league camp since he's been a part of the organization, former second-round pick. He stormed through 3 different levels last year in the minor leagues. Great in high A, great in double A, triple A. Of course, he struggled a little bit, but overall, results wise from Brandon Sproat, it was a top studs showcase easily against the Nationals. 6 up, 6 down, 2 perfect innings. Those whiff numbers are wrong, by the way. He gave you, I believe, 34 pitches in total, 1 swing and miss, one K, but overall he did showcase the new sinker, which apparently is something that he's been using a lot more under the tutelage of Jeremy Hefner and the higher parts of the major leagues and the minor leagues. And, almost 16 inches of run. Lots of low spin. To be honest, I'm going to tell you right now, some of these four seams and changeups seem to be a little bit of a misread. But the overall shape, it seems like, again, like we've talked about with fastballs hovering around 4 with VAA and vertical approach angle, which is basically the angle that the ball crosses the home plate, which is, an elite set for him. It looked like some of the induced vertical break, which you want a lot higher for a fastball, it was a little bit down. And that's probably the main reason as to why he wasn't getting graded out as well as he was. Originally, he usually sits at around 18 inches to 19 inches. I don't know if that was just him trying to complement it with his changeup overall, which is also a hard changeup. And obviously the difference between vertical approach angle is about 3 degrees for him from what it's being posted here from the 4 seam to changeup. But overall, it was a great outing. He was inducing ground balls as well at a good rate. Also introduced a cutter as well, which we have not really seen him throw as much. We know he has that slow get me over curveball that he has had since the very beginning. Before he was even drafted. He was drafted here actually twice, of course, did not sign after being drafted in the 3rd round. In the 2nd round, he came and signed once again with the Mets. And obviously, like I said, the number 1 overall prospect for the New York Mets. 46th overall ranked prospect via MLB Pipeline. It's probably different because I believe today Pipeline came out with their new rankings. So I'm sure we'll do a little bit of a reaction to that when my co-hosts come back. But again, a near 1 earned run average in high A, double A, 2.45. Struggled a little bit in AAA, and he was able to be public with that and talk about, how the nerves kind of got to him at the AAA level, which again, it is a big high hitting environment at that level. So it makes sense. Now, as for the Mets and their struggles with pitchers and injury history, we know that this starting rotation is going to be a point of emphasis this year as to if this team succeeds or not. We know that they have Montas on the shelf for quite a while. Manaya is going to be out for a few weeks at the minimum. And of course, Brandon Sproat comes into this equation with a lot of fans and saying, okay, well, he pitched well. Let's put him into the rotation. I don't see that happening, guys. I'm going to be completely honest. I don't see Brandon Sproat being in the opening day rotation by any means. I think that it's going to probably be at earliest maybe June, July. Maybe you see him at September call-ups. I don't know. The Mets seem to have a decent amount of pitching depth that it seems like they're going to get through before they call up the young kid in Brandon Sproat. He needs to grab his footing in AAA first. Facing AAA batters, just like how they did with Christian Scott. And if he does excel at a different level, then you could see him in the major leagues at some point. I don't think that they're going to use him as a injury pivot option. I think it's going to be when he is ready. So you're going to see a decent amount of people, a decent amount of guys come up through the league, starting pitching wise, that are not going to be Brandon Sproat before he gets called up here. That's the conclusion that we are getting. And I feel like it's a good conclusion to have right now, of course, where you don't want to rush these types of pitchers. Pitchers are a different type of breed in that way. And of course, when he talks about the nerves getting to him in AAA, he's going to have to settle down in AAA first before maybe the possible nerves get to him in the major leagues. So again, I am not looking to, push for Brandon Sproat to be on the opening day roster. Obviously, he has more talent than a lot of these guys on their opening day rotation or expected to be in the opening day rotation. But again, they're going to have to take this slow. We all know workloads with pitchers are a lot different. We will talk a little bit more about Blade Tidwell as well down the way. He's a little bit older than Brandon Sproat by like a few months. So he's not, again, like these guys are very young, 23, 24. I mean, it's not really something that I think that they're really going to push. I feel like right now with the starting rotation, we will talk about it in a second, but some of these options, they're not really trying to fill in spots on this roster. I feel like they're just trying to fill in innings at this current moment. And I think that is the right way to go because, again, innings need to be filled in when it comes to the conclusion of a 162-game season. And I understand that this rotation doesn't look great. You have question marks in it. You have injury concerns. I get that. But you're going to have to cover some of the innings that you are missing from somebody that is hurt, or the innings that you need to get from a starting rotation in order to not kill the bullpen. And obviously, with the Mets having some long relief options in this bullpen coming up, Jose Budo being one of them. I don't know if Tyler McGill fits into that equation. It seems like he's being stretched out as a starter at this current moment. But when it comes to the overall pitching staff, I think that the role and sliding these guys in, the day of those types of pitching roles are over. It's all really just about piecing together these innings. And that may be a little bit sounding, risky or not that much of a guarantee, but that's kind of just how pitching staffs are now. I mean, it really is just become a day of where it just is a committee. And that's basically just what arm is available and what isn't available. I think that, when it comes to a lot of these pitchers, you're always going to have these concerns with the injury history, the overall age, the overall production. There's a lot of things that you have to talk about. No rotation is perfect, and no rotation will be looked at without any flaws whatsoever, and that including health. I know that the Dodgers have a super rotation, but there's health concerns there. I mean, you can't have a perfect rotation. All five of these pitchers, maybe six of these pitchers, if you go to a 6-man rotation, all of them pitching over 120 innings. It's just not going to happen, especially in this day when the game is more accelerated. We can go to back in my day all I want, and these guys pitch 300 innings every single year. This game's accelerated now. Guys hit the ball a lot harder. So again, it's right now, on paper, there are concerns with this rotation, and I get it. But right now, the goal for me is to survive to this deadline. And that's pretty much the look of it. I feel like we're looking at 162 games as one stage altogether when it comes to this rotation. And I understand the panic of it, especially after the start we got yesterday, from what we got from Paul Blackburn in Boston, which was not great. But, you just need to establish something as to where these guys are ready. They come up. But overall, with Brandon Sproat, from what we saw, inducing ground balls with the new sinker that he does have, seems to have a decent amount of confidence in it. Again, like I said, with the StatCast, it seemed like there were a few misreads and a few fastballs that were being recognized as changeups because he throws a hard changeup. But at like a different trajectory, and those two tunneling as well as they are, but it seemed like he had a decent amount of difference between them. Slider and cutter. Slider, he did not feature as much, but everything pretty much looked sharp. It seemed like everything came easy to him. And 6 up, 6 down. That's really all you can ask for from a guy like Brandon Sproat in his first spring appearance in big league camp. Let's get into some of the comments here as well. But Brad saying, can the season start already? It would be nice to cut off some of these injuries as well, but these guys need to get ramped up, which kind of sucks. Dwayne Banks saying, I guess Stearns has a plan for the pitching staff. I think that he's kind of weighing out a lot of these options right now. I know that a lot of Mets fans came with a lot of frustration today when Jose Quintana signed with the Milwaukee Brewers. The thing is that yes, Quintana possibly could have made this rotation deeper. The problem is there is context that gets missed a lot with this whole topic, is the fact that yes, he would have helped us out, but the thing is that if you're trying to replace Manaea or even Frankie Montas, but Frankie Montas obviously will be out a little bit longer, but when it comes to Sean Manaea at this current stage, they don't have as much of a worry long term for it. Maybe he comes back in late April, mid-April, early May, something like that. When it comes to, pitchers are out there reporting a lot earlier. They're usually ahead of the hitters, ahead of the position players. So with Jose Quintana not being here, he's going to be far behind pretty much everyone. I mean, we're already into March now. Pitchers and catchers reported in the second week of February. So by the time that he's ready and fully ramped up to give you those innings, like, yes, he could be in the opening day rotation, but he probably could only go like 3 or 4 innings at the pace that you're going. So again, if you sign a pitcher right now, it's not really going to do anything as much as you think for the current situation and the current context. But, we'll see, how they kind of configure some of these things. We saw that they brought Jose Urena in on a minor league contract. I would want to do a little bit of a rundown on him. But Vanilla Gorilla saying that Sproat will be up in September unless something goes drastically wrong with the guys in front of them. Absolutely. They seem to have a decent amount of guys who might start off in AAA and maybe they end up being part of the rotation. Obviously, they had to dip into that depth a little bit earlier than they thought that they would have to, with Montas and Manaea going down. But you just have to, you just have to, at some point, collect the innings that you need to get. I think that at some point, and also adding on to it, no need to rush Sproat up, etc. Young players need to work, making up 25 plus starts a year too. Fans need to be patient. I'm just excited that we have guys to get impatient for, waiting for. Exactly. We have a lot of these. We have a lot of these prospects that have made the Mets farm system a lot deeper. And there are guys that you really, really need to do. You really have to do diligence on, ramping them up to the major league workload, because the major league workload is a lot different to the minor league workload. As of right now, we saw that concern with Christian Scott, of where they were trying to kind of baby him in a way, which we completely understood. In that way, I mean, I understood it with the fear of the injury and the overall workload for him. There was a concern there, and they still ended up, that concern ended up still coming to fruition. I mean, that it just happens. You can't really do anything to prevent these injuries. Jose Quintana was not going to solve anything. Nothing else was going to be completely solved with, bringing in a signing or two or trading for someone. Right now, the Mets are kind of in that situation where, camp's starting and whatever they got, they've got. And hopefully we don't have any more injuries. I think that if we get another injury, then we're going to start to get into that panic zone. But it is a long season. And no matter who you're getting the innings from, you're going to have to get the innings from someone. And I understand wanting to go after the star power, but there's not really much star power available at this current moment. We're kind of focused on the regular season now and preparing for the regular season going forward. Truro saying on paper, it may look ugly if we have guys giving 5 innings of 2 to 3 earned run ball, turn it over to pen, we will be in good shape. And that's why the pen is designed as well as it is. AJ Minter, we have seen him kind of, slowly move along, but it looks like he's going to be ready for opening day at the pace that he is going. Dinel Nunez coming back healthy, hopefully. Obviously, Edwin Diaz, the frontline guy in that bullpen. Reed Garrett had a great year last year. He'll be in there. We'll see what happens with Jose Butto. You never know. But again, this pitching staff is going to be, piece by piece together. It's not going to be full on guarantee. You might have some struggles in that way. But in the weakness part of this roster, I do think that it can be addressed in some way. But like I say all the time, you have to find a way to piece these things together. And then also, it's 162 games ahead of you. Like, it's not going to be fixed with gumdrops and rainbows of this guy's an ace and this guy's an ace, and he'll come in here, because talent doesn't mean everything. Talent applies these stats if they are applied and executed properly. But you need a committee of arms, 8 to 10 arms, in my opinion, going into a 162 game season is a lot more important than just building a super rotation to go into opening day. So again, if you want to hunt for that star power, the trade deadline is in August, the beginning of August, but right now we are in March. It is too early right now, and we'll see how all of this pans out. But other than that, I do want to talk about some of the starting pitching options that have kind of emerged this last week. And obviously, it is very early in spring training to just full on declare everything that's going to go on in the regular season. But of course, with the Mets having multiple injuries already in their rotation and also some injury concerns, let's not talk about the fact that, Kodai Senga, who, even though he's making a start today, and we'll finish off on the backfields as well at Clover Park today, there was some injury concern last year from him. Obviously, he's more confident that he will be injured. He won't be injured. Obviously, it comes with more confidence in that way when it comes to a pitcher, but you just never know with this position, and that's why you need the committee of arms. Now, speaking of guys that could be on this committee, I want to talk about Max Kranick for a second, because Max Kranick so far in spring has looked very, very impressive. Now, for those of you who don't know who Max Kranick is, Max Kranick was claimed off of waivers from Pittsburgh last year. And he was in that competition as maybe the 8th starter on the depth chart last year. He ended up going down with a hamstring strain. I think that he pitched like a few garbage time innings in the postseason for us. He was on our postseason roster as like a main reliever. He's had a lot of injuries in the past. He came back from Tommy John surgery last season, and then obviously had the hamstring injury, like I said. So I do want to do a little bit of a rundown on Max Kranick, because he is a 7-pitch arm. And for those of you who see the reclassification with his overall pitch set, these are different pitches that he does have. Obviously, the 4-seam, which is the main part of his spring that has been the most impressive. He's been locating it fairly well. Vertical approach angle, like I've said, hovering around 4. That's what you want. Almost 17 inches of induced vertical break. He has touched 97 so far, which is good, coming back from Tommy John surgery, obviously, like I said, and being on the shelf for multiple times. The slider, overall, some really good arm side movement. Of course, he's getting a decent amount of chases. He's getting a lot of guys swinging. He's had a decent amount of ground balls that he's induced as well. He's only thrown 69 pitches total, but we are seeing a starter type of arsenal up here. Sweeper as well. High spin sweeper with which goes, of course, a lot more to the arm side as well. He also has a curveball, kind of a slow curveball at the high 70s. Changeup, which it seemed like he was having a little bit of a tough time commanding it at a few times, but still overall has 7 swings and misses so far. He also has a sinker that seems like he contact manages with and doesn't try to get any swings and misses with. The cutter, of course, is there to help bridge the slider and the sweeper, of course, with the separation on the arm side as well. So definitely pitching to left-handed batters and left-handed hitters and left-handed and right-handed hitters. Overall, he's looked really, really good with the overall, setup here. And, more weapons, more kills is things that we talk about. The overall stuff grades, you're seeing 114 stuff plus from his four seam, his slider, 114 as well, 110 from his sweeper, 87 from his curveball, which I'm pretty sure it's because he does not have as much drop. He's probably leaving it over the plate or something. But again, that's lower usage, of course. He's more fastball and slider. 2 pitches, of course, which have seemed to be something that he's weaponized as a reliever. But overall, with this overall arsenal, again, these are the types of guys that you're going to probably see compete for this rotation spot for the rest of spring. And they have been so far. And like I've said, him coming off of injury, that second jolt to your arm, of course, that Tommy John can be, the hamstring strain, of course. Max Kranick right now, I think that he has a decent shot to make the rotation. Did he add the sinker in the lab? I don't know if he added the sinker in the lab. I think there was it's either a sinker or cutter that he added, because I know that he was strictly more 2 pitches before he came in, but he also had some other weapons as well. Yes, sinker that he did end up adding the sinker in the lab. So obviously to complement some of those pieces with some other weapons, such as some of the breaking balls. We've seen that he has a sweeper as well. We'll see how, the Mets kind of utilize these things, because right now they're bringing in pieces, or they're using pieces that can basically register outs. It seems like the Mets really do like these ground ball pitchers in this way. They don't like to see these guys air this stuff out and just completely, throw their arm out, which is really, really good. Obviously, when it comes to the ground ball stuff, the contact management, the Mets have the defense up the middle, the run prevention that David Stearns really likes in center field. I feel like, creating outs on the ground, contact managing, locating properly, it does all have a room in getting volume from your starter. Obviously, we love to have these strikeout guys, but piecing together these types of innings. And of course, we do have a decent amount of strikeout pitchers as well coming out of the bullpen for these high leverage situations, which is the main reason as to why it complements so well from the starting rotation. And when it comes to Max Kranick, I think that he is one of those guys in there. It's a very impressive selection of pitches. Let's just say that. Overall, great shape. Let's hope that he can continue to locate as well as he has been. But I think that when it comes to the overall of, piecing together this rotation, I still think that regarding any other injury, they're going to have to go with a 6-man rotation just because of Kodai Senga. It all really has to do with Kodai Senga. But again, there is, Minaya as well, in that where he talked about last year running out of gas like he did last year, and that extra day of rest where he can be ready for the playoffs and have a solid workload for the playoffs and not hit a wall. That's definitely another factor that you have to put in here, where all of these pitchers get helped out with this extra day of rest. And hopefully there is a development in this way where this rotation's a lot healthier and we have a little bit more of reliance on these other guys. Vanilla coming in here saying Clay Holmes. I'm a lot more talking about Clay Holmes as well in his new kick change. We talked about Clay Holmes last week of what we saw from his spring debut, but so far he has looked great as well. We will see how all of this, stuff per se, we'll see how all of these pitchers' stuff last throughout starts. If you lose a little bit of the effectiveness in the 4th inning or the 5th inning, things that we've seen with some of the other pieces we've seen already. Tyler McGill, we know that is a big thing for him, of losing the effectiveness of his stuff. and going 1 or 2 innings, and that's about it, and basically burning out the bullpen. He is going to be in that equation for the starting rotation, unfortunately, even though right now there's really nothing that we haven't seen already from him. He makes adjustments every year, so maybe this is the year. Who knows? We saw, Peterson struggle for quite a while to gain consistency. He was able to gain that consistency in 2024. Let's see if he can stack on from that. So there are guys in this rotation that together as a whole, they're going to have to piece together these innings somehow, because yes, there is lack of star power in the Mets rotation, but I just don't think that they're in a position to go for that star power. They're going to have to work with what they have. And when it comes to a rotation, I've talked about it before. I truly don't even believe that rotations exist anymore at this point. I mean, you really have to have a committee of arms, possibly like 2.5 the sizes of rotations for rotation depth, because of injuries and who's available the next day and who's going to come through the next day. That's pretty much what rotations are. And yes, it has hit the Mets harder than any other team. We saw that. I think the Yankees, Luis Gil, just went down with a lat strain, which is the same thing that Frankie Montas has. So hopefully it all pieces together down the stretch. You're going to win some and you're going to lose some in that way with the pitching staff. And I think that when it comes to some of those injuries, you might not have the sexiest names, but at least they're kind of looking at it from the concept of upside in a way where maybe they can give you something, but it's very, very low risk. Now, speaking of this low risk, I do want to get into another arm that was acquired this week and the Mets signed, and that being Jose Urena. Now, Jose Urena has been a swingman his entire career. Definitely has struggled for that type of consistency throughout his career. Last year, it seemed like he had a career year with Texas, and he made about 9 starts, I believe, for them. Now, overall, the big specialty for a guy like Jose Urena is the ground ball. 50.6% ground ball rate, which is in the 84th percentile in 2024. He's 33 years old. He's a 4-pitch mix. Throws hard, not a big strikeout guy. Does throw strikes, though. 3.8 earned run average last year. So we'll see how this all comes to concept. He seemed to struggle a little bit with the home run ball last year. The locating has definitely been something that has behooved him recently. Let's just say that. But he is able to get ahead of the count very, very well. It seems like he has that hard changeup. Of course, he can hit the high 90s and reach the high 90s. This isn't something that I think will be as, on the level of anybody, but it is somebody who can stopgap and help somebody like Sproat or Tidwell get their footing in AAA while we wait for them. One thing that I do want to point out for him is he was very, very good out of the bullpen for Texas. And he did make the 9 spot starts, of course, with a 5.08 earned run average, 5.29 fielding independent pitching, 44.1 innings pitched with Texas as a starter. So again, I don't know how he kind of fits into that role. But to me, what I am looking at this as is probably the new Trevor Williams role, because I feel like they expected Paul Blackburn to probably be in that role, but with these injuries, they kind of had to move him up in the rotation. And Jose Urena comes into that formula as to where he can come out of the bullpen, make a spot start, nothing too flashy or anything, little bit of empty velocity, I would say. Overall pitch shapes are very, very close together, I would say. It's very, he's a very, very weird pitcher. Let's just say that. But from the angle that he throws from, it does seem like he is a little bit better against left-handed hitters than right-handed hitters, which is kind of weird, obviously. But it seems like he is able to shift from that side. We are getting, like he's definitely a north to south pitcher. Let's just say that. Lots of rise. Excuse me, lots of rise on the fastball. A lot of run on his sinker to the glove side. So we'll see how the contact management looks like, because that's pretty much the only thing that he has really going for him in this way. The thing is that when it comes to somebody like Jose Urena, I don't know if you're going to get any volume from him as a starter. You could get some value from him as a reliever in some sorts, but for some reason, being that type of swing man role is something that the Mets are obviously going to have to piece together because of the uncertainty with this rotation. And I feel like that kind of gets moved in for a guy like Jose Urena, who most likely will end up starting in AAA. You never know. He has not made an appearance yet for the Mets in spring training, but I feel like it's really, really hard to judge these moves from anything, because you could see some adjustments being made, and every single thing that I'm showing you here probably won't even matter when it comes to Jose Urena. Maybe he has a few new pitches. Maybe there's some adjustments that he makes. He lowers the arm angle. There's a lot of different things that the Mets have been doing with a lot of rapid adjustments with a lot of their pitchers. It's not just of the course of Shamania and, him changing the arm slot that he has. It's also, adding pitches, making a lot more of deeper arsenal, also allowing a lot of guys to become more ground ball guys, and try to prevent a lot more of this hard contact, which was a little bit of a problem for our pitching last year. But we were able to kind of get around it. Obviously, trying to miss bats is something that has behoved the Mets for quite a while. But when it comes to, the full thought of the rotation, I feel like they want to keep all the bases covered and not just have somebody who does something so elite and everything else they really, really struggle with. Right now, I think at the current moment of the depth, at the current moment of the resources that they have compared to other teams when it comes to pitching, I think the best way to go right now is to leave the stuff monsters to the stuff monsters in the bullpen and develop the stuff monsters for your overall rotation internally. And I feel like there is a lot of frustration when it comes to this rotation. It comes a lot to the pitching staff in the way of how Stearns kind of designs this thing. But it really just sends you a message that developing your own pitching is the best way to go. And that's the main reason as to why we're putting a lot of the spotlight on somebody like Brandon Sproat, on somebody like Blade Tidwell, but adding in it organizational guys and not putting all your eggs into one basket, giving $40 million a year to the Max Scherzers and the Justin Verlanders, or, paying Corbin Burns or going out and getting Snell. Like, with the resources that they have right now, they're going to have to build it as to where they get to that point where they can maybe spend at some point on these types of pitchers, and not just making the team look good from the top with just the names that they get. Jose Urena is not a big name. We know that he has a history with some NL East teams. I'm pretty sure he has a little bit of a beef with Ronald Acuna Jr. When he's thrown inside to him. I know that he's been wild before. We'll see what they can do with him. And if he does not end up being good or anything, you can always cut him. It's a very low risk in that scenario. And this is while you are waiting for some of these young guys to come up through the system. I mentioned Sproat, Tidwell, who had a really good season in AA, struggled in AAA as well, just like Sproat did. Jonah Tong is a little bit farther down the line. Nolan McLean will probably start off in AA, be in AAA this year. There are some pitchers out there right now for the Mets who, carefully, slowly, if you were to develop them, they will be able to come up with some really, really good stuff in that way, whether it is in the rotation or in the bullpen. But overall, there are a lot of pitching prospects out there that we are very, very, excited for. But the development takes time. It really does take time. And this is a very different game now where guys can't just come up at age 19 and just start blowing past guys and be the phenomenon like, Doc Gooden or, all of these guys. It's just a different situation. Let's just say that. Ricardo in here saying, I'm very excited about Max Kranick. I believe Max Kranick is going to be pitching once again tonight. He's probably going to get 1 or 2 innings. We saw, I think David Peterson is pitching tonight. I don't know, because the MLB app said that David Peterson was starting tomorrow, but then you also got this report from Mike Mayer that David Peterson was going to pitch today, which is just so odd. I don't even know. Some of these reports are just so conflicting. Dom Hamill, I would say Dom Hamill is probably more in that relieving sense, just because of how wild that he is. But, it seems like they're still trying to stretch him out to be a starter. Personally, I would probably put him in that department of the reliever. But you never know. Chad's saying that Blackburn will be better. He most likely will be. Again, you just never know what the situation is going to be with some of these guys, because there are a lot of shots in the dark with this rotation, and I feel like that's the uneasy start of it. But, throwing darts at a board and seeing what you come up with, Max Kranick is definitely impressed so far. It's still early in spring. You never know what it's going to look like so far. In spring, Kranick has definitely been impressive. But when it comes to Max Kranick, if he does have team control, he does have team control. I think another 4 years of team control. So that's pretty good. He's still in pre-arb. He has 1 minor league option left. So he definitely could start off in AAA. But if he does end up making the rotation, who knows? It might happen. It seems like you guys are mixed on that one. 32% of you are saying yes and no. And 36% of you are saying you need to see more, which makes a lot of sense, of course, with us being in the first few weeks of spring training. You never know what is going to happen. But again, I feel like a lot of these options that I just listed out, Max Kranick, Jose Urena, and then, of course, with the add-on to some of the prospects, there's going to be a lot of moving parts with this rotation throughout the entire year. And it's going to make you probably uncomfortable in the way that you probably would like a normal rotation to look like. But again, with how the injuries are, this is kind of just the hand that you're dealt now. And you're just going to have to see who is available at any point in time. And I feel like at some point, you're going to have to establish a rotation and see who is going to be a part of this team's future. But it's going to have to be a lot of moving in and out. You can't commit long-term to pitching, in my opinion. I don't think that there really was anybody out there that you should have committed long-term to on the free agent market. And this is why, injuries like this, they don't just happen to the bad pitchers. They happen to the good pitchers as well. And it just proves the point even more that this position just breaks. That's all it does. It's continued to do that. And there's nothing really that you can do about it, And Ricardo saying Stearns is basically playing money ball with pitching. And listen, I think that it's more of just like the bridge to the future plan that they have and kind of giving the leeway to a lot of the young guys. But, part of this rotation, I feel like, can be good, and you're going to have to piece these things together in some way. It's not going to be perfect. We know it's not going to be, but you just never know. And I did talk about Quintana going to the Brewers. Like I said, I'm not losing any sleep on it. Let's just say that. again, speaking of the Brewers, they did hire Billy Epler, so it is kind of funny that they signed somebody that Billy Epler ended up signing with the Mets a few years ago. So you hire Epler, and he's ending up calling the shots anyways. But for those of you in here, make sure to hit the like button if you have not already. It would be greatly appreciated. Hit the subscribe button. We are live every single Monday during spring training for new episodes of our podcast. Normally, it's not just me. We have Frank and Andrew as well, who will be joining us. We have a few guests that are lined up going down the line during spring training, so we'll definitely seize for that. But at this current moment, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Of course, I want to move over now. Speaking of positions and speaking of players that need to be healthy, let's actually get into this injury report. We've got quite a lot of information to put out here, so bear with me here. Nick Madrigal will undergo surgery on his fractured left shoulder later this week. The veteran infielder suffered the injury during a split squad game last Sunday in West Palm Beach. Mets manager Carlos Mendoza revealed that Madrigal is likely out for the entirety of the 2025 season. Mets breakout reliever Denel Nunez is not expected to participate in spring games anytime soon, as the Mets will continue the slow ramp-up process after missing the entire second half of 2024 with multiple forearm injuries. The Mets still do believe the 29-year-old will be ready for opening day. Newly signed Mets reliever A.J. Minter was facing batters on Sunday morning for the first time since undergoing torn labrum surgery in his left hip in August of 2024. The 31-year-old right-hander is considered slightly ahead of schedule in rehab, making his status for opening day more and more likely. Mets infield prospect Luis Angel Acuna exited Saturday's game early after being hit on the left elbow with a pitch. After talking to the trainers, there is no further concern, and he is now considered day-to-day. The injury will not require any x-rays or other imaging as of right now. Mets outfielder Brandon Nimmo is dealing with some right knee soreness after playing his first spring game last week. Nimmo worked out in practice earlier today, and he could return to the lineup as soon as tomorrow. Mets manager Carlos Mendoza reported that there is a low level of concern right now for the veteran outfielder. Mets outfielder Starling Marte is also continuing to deal with some right knee soreness that he was experiencing 8 months ago that has had little to no improvement. Marte will begin taking live BP sometime in March, which he did today on the Clover Park backfields until he is ready for spring games. And I do want to talk a little bit about the outfield situation because they did acquire someone by the name of Alexander Canario, who I've seen a few ABs from in spring so far. But, for the time being, there is a little bit of concern going on with the Mets outfield of the health of some of these players. We also did get an update on Drew Gilbert, where it was a very weird update, actually. It's possible that maybe he doesn't play any spring games and they're just keeping it slow and he's just ramping up and being ready for the minor league season, which is really weird. But, we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get a little bit more details on that. But I do want to talk about Alexander Canario because there are a few factors that go into this situation that I feel like not many are talking about. And I think that when it comes to the Mets acquiring some of this talent on the 40-man roster, there's obviously corresponding moves for it. It was the corresponding move for Nick Madrigal going on the 60-day IL. Like I just said, he is most likely out for the season. But as for some talent to harvest with Alexander Canario, getting him from the Cubs for cash considerations in the minor leagues, he was definitely considered one of the top prospects. That was one of the returning pieces from San Francisco in the Chris Bryant trade in 2021. Now, last year and the year before, he really has not gotten much of a chance in the major leagues for the Cubs. 17 plate appearances in 2023, 28 plate appearances in 2024. But overall, some of these peripherals that he does have, hits the ball hard, and lots of, the barrel rate, of course, in the 99th percentile, fluctuated sample, of course, can play left field and right field. He's only played 6 innings in center field, so that probably won't end up happening. We've seen him play the corners so far. 60 power grade. As for his scouting, he was a former international signing by the Giants, of course, like I said, sent in the Chris Bryant trade in the 2021 trade deadline. Overall toolsy player, let's just say that. Good arm, power, somewhat plus speed in some way. Decent defender, decent corner defender, 5'11". He's 25 years old. And one detail that I do want to add here, and it does make this acquisition sound a little weird, is that the fact that Canario does not have any minor league options left. So the only way that he can stay with this organization on a guarantee, unless he clears waivers, which I don't think he will end up doing, because I think that there's plenty of upside left in this type of player. I think right now, he needs to make the team in order to stay with the organization, or he will have to be DFA'd. He is out of minor league options, which kind of makes us start to wonder what is going on with this outfield. Obviously, the Mets have the platoon in center field with Jose Siri and Tyrone Taylor. I don't think they want to keep them in the lineup together unless it's against a lefty, which I don't think is going to happen. But when it comes to Canario, the guy that goes into this situation more than anyone is Starling Marte. And we all know that Starling Marte right now is lined up to be the right-handed DH. And we've talked about this plenty of times before about the return on investment with a guy like Starling Marte, the contract that you got for him, the overall balance of how to configure this outfield is very, very weird. Canario, picking him up for cash considerations, you're not really giving up much, of course, but he's going to have to make the opening day roster in order to stay with the organization. I think he will be picked up very, very quickly if he ends up just not, if he ends up not staying with the organization. I don't think that he's going to pass through waivers. That could be happening. But that kind of comes with the story that we got from Starling Marte, where he has this knee soreness that apparently has not gotten any better since the 8 months ago that he was experiencing it. Here's the thing. I talk about Starling Marte in a way of him being a very, very non-factor, and he seems to right now in the role that he's in this non-factor. But the problem is that there's $20 million to this guy's name right now for 2025. And I don't have any confidence right now that Starling Marte is going to be able to give us really anything. Like, I really I'm not confident in that way, because from some of the stuff that we are hearing here it's very, very concerning that knee soreness that Starling Marte has. He's had that same knee soreness for 8 months. And I was debating about this on Twitter multiple times with so many people of this. And I, whether you agree with me or not, wouldn't you think, okay, this is just a wonder. I'm not a doctor. Okay. I am not a doctor. I'm just making an assumption. Okay. This is a pure assumption here. Wouldn't you think that if you have the same amount of soreness that is not getting better for 8 months, wouldn't you think that, like, maybe there's something else going on here? I don't know if it's just me. That's just the feeling that I get when it comes to Starling Marte. He's getting older. He's 36 years old. the role is already diminished. But the main concern that I have here is you have the injury concern. The last 2 seasons, he has played half a season, not even gave you 100 games. And right now, you are asking him to face lefties, which there are less of a population of lefties in this game. So that diminishes his role even more. Jesse Winker gets most of the reps at DH. So Starling Marte against left-handed pitching, let's say less than half of the games, 60 games. You're relying on him to play 60 games as a DH, where his lower half has continued to fail him. And he continues to be a power liability these last 2 years. He has not hit a home run since like the middle of June. He has 4 extra base hits since coming back from the injured list in the middle of the season last year. Like we have said, I just feel like there's something else here as to where with Canario coming in here with no minor league options, you have him starting slow, even though he's taking batting practice. You're seeing him do that. But like we continue to have these concerns every time. And I'll ask you guys straight up here live. Do you trust that Starling Marte can give you even half of the games that you're expecting to give him to? Like, I don't see a possibility where that happens. And Alexander Canario, whether he does have this upside or not, he is younger, but he has not proven anything as to where he can just be the right-handed DH. Maybe he shows it in spring. Who knows? The problem is that you have such diminished value and return on investment as to where Mets fans wonder, why can't they get the starting pitching that they want to get? Why can't they fill the rotation? These types of contracts are why. And what is that contract doing at this current moment? He is your platoon DH hitting left-handed pitching. And I understand that his numbers against left-handed pitching are good throughout his entire career. This is nothing against Marte personally. I'm sure he's a great guy. And to be honest, when he came into the league in 2012, he was one of my favorite players in the league. He's always been one of my favorite players, but he's gotten older. That's the reality of the situation. He's gotten older. He's continued to get hurt, and it's a problem. Not to mention from the outside looking in, just the DH position alone, even though I like Jesse Winker, Kyle Schwarber, the Phillies have Kyle Schwarber and they have Nicholas Castellanos as DH options. The Dodgers have Ohtani. The Braves have Ozuna. Even teams that are contenders in the American League, the Yankees have Giancarlo Stanton, who has also had the injury history. Astros have Yordan Alvarez. I mean, all these contenders, they have a legitimate DH. And it's a platoon that I feel like is going to be a weakness. It is going to be a weakness. And I don't see any possibility where he does get traded. I think that they're just going to bite the bullet on this one. But the problem is that you're running into a situation where you're getting nothing close to what you wanted from Starling Marte for possibly 3 consecutive years. And that just doesn't sit well with me. You can tell me everything about his numbers against left-handed pitching, which are good. I admit that, but he's not providing power. He's also chasing a lot. He's a big chaser. He loves to swing. You're looking at a very diminished role that continues to get smaller and smaller and smaller for a guy who's 36 years old, making $20 million. The problem that we have here is that I don't see this getting any better. He's 36 years old. He probably will experience this throughout the season. Who knows? But I feel like there are some situations where, I think the Mets should have traded him in the offseason. I feel like there was better ways to accolade things in ways because, again, the Mets, $20 million to the Mets right now is a lot different because, again, you have this luxury tax where in individual players, you are paying 110% of that salary in addition to their salary to keep them on here. They're not getting the money, obviously, but there is a tax that comes with it. So when it comes to Starling Marte making $20 million this year, he's really making like $41 million. And that's to keep a platoon DH who's 36 years old, does not give you any power, can't play defense well anymore, can't really run the bases that well because his entire lower half is nearly compromised. I get that he still can give value to this team, but I think overall it's holding them back. And again, we're still getting this, talk of Starling Marte being banged up. So at some point, they're going to have to realize it as to where, maybe he's just not reliable. And if he starts the season on the IL, what else are you going to do? Canario probably would be the guy that makes the opening day roster if somebody like Marte, is not healthy for opening day and we have more issues in this way. But this is exactly what I'm talking about with Starling Marte. I'm not saying that he's had a career-ending injury and he never will play ever again. But what I'm saying is there's nothing that you can do right now. And, there are reasons as to why this team is still being held back in some way. In very little increments, it continues to be, money coming off the books every single year. But I really, really think that we are in for a nightmare of a ride in 2025 for Starling Marte. And I hate saying that because I loved him as a player. He's had a near 40-win season throughout his entire career. He's had a great career. He's well respected in that clubhouse. I know that he is. I got nothing against Starling Marte. For those of you who think I hate him, I don't. I'm just talking about this reality of the situation here. The problem that you are facing is that you have, about $27 million committed to this DH platoon, but you have the guy getting paid less in Jesse Winker to give you the most ABs and give you the most competitive ABs because Winker seems to never have an uncompetitive AB in his life. But with Marte, there is a somewhat of concern with, of course, him missing a decent amount of time over the last two seasons. That, when you hear this exact same knee soreness that he has had for 8 months, that doesn't sit well with me. And another thing that really doesn't sit well with me is how this tweet is referred to. Tim Healy of Newsday, Mets beat writer, he put something out about Starling Marte, about his knee soreness and his health status and what we could expect going forward for the Mets and Starling Marte. And what we heard in this last sentence, and I will pop it up on the screen for you guys when I can find it, because for some reason I cannot find it right now. Let's see. But it basically gave us a little bit farther of, I don't know if it's word for word, but Here's the tweet that we got from Tim Healy. And tell me this does not concern you in some way. Here's what he said. He said, no word on when Starling Marte, right knee, still, will get into Grapefruit League games. Carlos Mendoza said he has some good days and some not so good in his running progression. Here's this last sentence that really freaks me out. The Mets remain confident he can physically be a major leaguer still. Excuse me? I'm sorry, what? He can be a major leaguer still? Does that not, concern anyone at all? We also did get a little bit of an update of how in the next few days he'll probably get into a few games. But it's TBD whether it's going to be Grapefruit League games or minor league games. I don't know if this is just Tim Healy's wording with things, but that gives me a massive concern with what you're getting from Starling Marte this year. And I know that the lineup is most likely not going to be a concern this year. The offense, I feel like, is going to be really good if everyone's on. But the last part of this saying, but progress either way. So I don't know what the expectation is right now regarding Starling Marte. And maybe Canario fits into that formula there, or maybe he's just a guy that they're trying out in spring training, and maybe they DFA him if he does not perform well. So far, I would say Canario's looked okay. Again, this is a very, very small sample size, but so far, I think that he's gotten a couple of hits, right? He is, let's see, he's 1 for 6. He's walked twice. Let's see, anything else? No, he didn't steal any bases. He's had 6 plate appearances. So again, very, very small sample size. It looks like we're going to see him as well in the lineup tonight. But when it comes to some reports that we are hearing, I feel like we're just waiting for the inevitable at this current moment. And that's what really does scare me in a way. Because I feel like this possibly could have been better if they did end up trading him. And we talked about it last week. I did with Frank on here, and he said that, I think this was off stream actually. He said that it's possible that these trades just never went through, especially with Kansas City. That report that we got from Pat Ragazzo early on this offseason about them trading him for Hunter Harvey, and it never went through. It possibly could have been just because of his physical health. Because there's just a lot of clues in here that are showing that I'm not really thrilled about this whole situation. And I feel like everything is just pointing to the fact that maybe Marte just is not 100%, and he never will be 100%, to be honest. He's getting older. It's not going to change in any way. But it really is a concern for me. I'm very, very concerned about what we're going to get from this 4th year from Starling Marte. Nothing against him as a player. At his best, he was very, very good for us. 2022, amazing year. That's not the Starling Marte I'm talking about right now. This is a Starling Marte that has undergone two groin surgeries. He has had, 5 different IL stints in the last 3 years. It's really, really tough to say that this guy is going to be reliable. And also, he's a part of the roster that is going to be somewhat of a concern, and maybe they're just going to have to address it somewhat. It seemed like they were willing to cover most of the salary in some of these trade reports. But I don't know. I feel like there's something else that is going on where, I don't know, maybe it's just me being just worried in general about this health of Starling Marte, because that has been my concern from the very, very beginning. But this is getting ugly, in my opinion, and we'll see how it escalates. Maybe he does stay healthy, maybe he doesn't, but I'm not confident that even if you move him to DH to keep him healthy, that this is going to help out. And it already hasn't. You're already seeing him not healthy enough. And they're already taking things slow in this way. I don't know if this is considered somewhat of an overreaction, because I know there are some people, watching this show that I know you guys, you still like Starling Marte. And that's fine. But as for the value, as per what you're expecting from him, it's very, very... It's a very sticky situation in that way. And maybe Canario has to do with it, and maybe he doesn't. I saw people talking about Nimmo early on in the chat. Nimmo's going to be fine. He always starts off spring training very, very slow. It looked like, obviously he had the sore knee, but it seems like he will be back in the lineup this week. He's going to be fine. That I'm not worried about at this current moment. But again, I think, there are some thoughts in this way where I just don't think a trade is going to happen. It's possible that it happens at the deadline. Who knows? Medina saying Miami needs to spend $95 million to not get penalized. Make a trade for Marte for $250K international. That will give Miami give Miami $20 million. There's been talks about that before too. I saw that. I don't know if that's going to happen. Brad's saying Marte has Embiid knees. Yes, he definitely does. Sad situation with Joel Embiid, but we're not here to talk about basketball, of course. Obviously, as a Knicks fan, I not the biggest fan of Joel Embiid as a person, but that is some rough stuff that could be career threatening going forward. Who knows? We'll see what happens with Starling Marte going forward, but I don't know. I don't have much confidence in this, and maybe Alexander Canario can help as to where he's a part-time player, gets a little bit of a chance here as compared to what he was doing with the Cubs, where he didn't really get much of a chance. But that's the main part of concern for me. Let's just say that. Now, speaking of actual, actual performances, let's actually get into everyone's favorite segment, which of course is studs and duds. One player that has played very, very well this week, one that has not. Obviously, it's just me here, so I will shout out quite a few here. Guys, let us know who your studs and duds are for this week for full-on performance. Obviously, it's a little bit more of a real reaction in this way. We're not really looking at results. We're kind of looking at the process of things in spring training, but it's a good way to kind of identify some of the good and some of the bad going on in these spring games. Now, as for the stud, there are quite some different types of different options that I do want to shout out here. Blade Tidwell, I want to put on this pedestal real quick after pitching the immaculate inning. Now, when it came to the MLB app and the non-statcast that they had during that game that they had, it usually shows like 3 strikes and then four balls, and then sometimes they show in play or whatever. It's not a really good, precise app when there's no statcast. So it looked like he was just striking everyone out and had an immaculate inning, so we didn't know if it was real or not. But for the people that were actually there, they said that it was an immaculate inning. The only thing that made it even more impressive was the fact that they were 9 strikes, 3 outs, obviously, and 9 swings and misses. So 9 consecutive whiffs. And it was his second inning of work. So hats off to Blade Tidwell. Hopefully we get a big year from him in AAA where he is going to start. Luis Torrens has played very, very well. so far, hitting the ball fairly well. He's showed off the arm a little bit. Also getting into some really, really competitive counts. I think, it all kind of gets lost into that situation, of course, with Francisco Alvarez being the main catcher that he is. But Luis Torrens has been a really, really solid player for the Mets ever since coming over for like $100K cash from the Yankees, which David Stearns picked up mid-season when Omar Narvaez was playing like absolute garbage behind the plate. Jesse Winker has had a really good spring as well. That has been a very, very good thing to see. But the guy that I'm going to appoint this one to is going to be Pete Alonso, because I think that every single AB that he has taken so far have been competitive. They've been really, really good. He's not chasing. He is making really, really good contact as well. He's looking closer and closer to his 2022 self. This is still very, very early. We'll see what happens. Decent amount of extra base hits so far. He hasn't homered yet. Maybe it happens tonight. Who knows? But, and then there's also another guy out there, which I'm going to have to address because we're live on Twitter too. I've talked about it many, many times on Twitter. I might as well talk about it. Let me get a sip of water first. Okay. My co-host Andrew saying, Stud Beatty. Listen. Brett Beatty so far in spring has looked good. The issue that I have with this, okay, it's not an issue really. The reason why I'm pulling back on this is because I've seen Brett Beatty have good springs before. I've seen Brett Beatty do very well before. And I've seen Brett Beatty tail off before. So some of the balls that he's been putting in play have been really good quality of contact. He's looked really good out there. But again, there is some things that need to be addressed in that way as to where this is the fourth consecutive spring training that Brett Beatty has been impressive to start off, has gotten off to a hot start. So right now, I'm not buying it yet. And I apologize if I don't give you the recency bias and tell you that this is going to be a new, guy, a new franchise guy for us. We have seen Brett Beatty have a little bit over 600 plate appearances in the majors. He has not been good. I'm going to need a little bit more from a first round pick. He's 25 years old. He's not a prospect anymore. I'm going to need a little bit more from this. Okay. And I have gotten a lot of shit for it. I definitely have. I'm just sarcastic in that way. I can be very, very straightforward. I've got nothing against Brett Beatty, the person. Okay? Let's just say that. It's not personal. So for those of you who are taking my comments about Brett Beatty personally, it's not going to be that, okay? It's just constructive in this way. I'm not getting excited yet. I'm not throwing a parade because, again, Brett Beatty, every single spring training, he has been impressive. I'm not rooting against Brett Beatty. Is Brett Beatty one of my guys and, I believe in him? No, I really don't. Because what we've seen so far is not great. He's been lapped by many different younger players in this system. I'm not going to fully invest in it yet. I'm not going to full on say that Brett Beatty is here. Every single thing that is said about Brett Beatty so far, I've heard it before. I've already heard it. He's made adjustments. Heard that last year. He's hitting the ball hard. Heard that last year. He's lifting the ball more. Heard that last year. Heard that the year before, too. So again, I am not completely investing all of this into Brett Baty being the guy for this team. It looks like he's going to be a second baseman if he makes this opening day roster. He has a minor league option left, and Donovan Walton doesn't. So that's going to be a point of emphasis, of course. I'm not buying it yet. I'm sorry, I can't do it. If Mets fans want to do so, go ahead. You have nothing. There's nothing bad about rooting for your own player. I am not saying that Brett Baty is completely useless. In the majors so far, he has been. You can't tell me he hasn't been. Not saying he can't get better. I'm not rooting against him. For those of you who think I'm rooting against him, and I'm looking right directly at Twitter, because I know there are people on Twitter who have gone after me for it. I'm not rooting against the guy, okay? I'm giving you the reality of this situation. I've talked about this many, many times before. I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. If you want people to bullshit for you, then you're in the wrong place. I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear and everything that you agree with. There's plenty of people in this chat that are here, and they know that I am not going to say things that they completely agree with. Many people have continued to disagree with me, and we're all able to have a civilized chat. It's fine. And listen, if I need to be the devil, if I need to be the villain in this situation, so be it. I'm not fully investing in to Brett Baty's start until we start to see a little bit more consistency. And that's just kind of how I feel. All right? It's nothing against him as a person. It's nothing against me having a personal vendetta against him. If you believe I do, I guess you can't really join this conversation in a objective way. Here's the thing, okay? Brett Baty has gotten a decent amount of chances already in the major leagues. Whether you believe that I am criticizing him for the results that we have seen so far in the major leagues, it's more half of that. The thing with Brett Baty is he's gotten plenty of chances in the major leagues. He's not done well. But the disparity between him hitting well in AAA compared to not hitting well in the majors, it's happened many, many, many times before. So again, we can make all the excuses that we want. We can put out as many participation trophies for spring training. I'm going to have to see a little bit more. And I apologize if that offends anyone. But I'm telling you right now, I'm not rooting against Brett Baty. I just don't believe that he's a major league player. If I'm allowed to have that opinion, if you're going to allow me to have that opinion, that's fine. If you're not going to, oh well, I'm still going to have it anyway. It's not going to stop me. So again, Brett Baty, I'm not buying into it. As for the dud, I think it's easily to say that it is Paul Blackburn. Rough outing for him. Wasn't great. Obviously, he's going to be somebody who they probably pull the plug on in the rotation if he does struggle to start off. He's still ramping up. He's still ramping up in that way where, you know, coming off of back surgery, he had the leaky spine or something. It really was not very appealing to hear. Let's just say that injury. And let's just say it wasn't something that You wanted to see, obviously, he went back out there for like a second inning or something and got like one, two, three innings or something. He was pitching to contact, wasn't able to miss bats whatsoever. We saw a few decent defensive plays behind him. I think Beatty had a diving stop. Alvarez had a nice throw to second. It was not a great outing for him. We'll give it time in spring training. I'm not ready to just completely cut him from the team yet, but we'll see what happens in terms of all of that. All right, so let's get into some of your questions in the chat here. So guys, let us know if you have any questions that are Mets related that you want my opinion on, some comments as well of what I've said or some things that you guys want to add into. M Easy saying they shouldn't have tried to sign Burns. They should have tried, but I'm pretty sure that they tried, but they just weren't willing to go multiple, like as many years as he wanted, which he got 6 years from Arizona, and it did not happen. But I'm not, I'm not blinking an eye at things like that. I don't really lose sleep over pitching going because, again, it's a crapshoot in any way. Let's just say that. Skeens for Beatty, I don't see that happening. Sorry, Brad. Beatty is bringing up his trade value. I don't know what it's going to look like, to be honest. I feel like they are trying to find a way as to where he could be in the opening day roster. He is going to be one of those guys that they consider. Like I've said for a second, Donovan Walton may be somebody that they do consider. We've been seeing some stuff from Anthony DiComo about that possibly happening because he is out of minor league options as to where he could be that backup utility guy. Listen, I think that position or that backup utility guy is going to be interchangeable throughout the entire season. Whether it ends up being Beatty or Acuna, Ronnie Mauricio has not been put into the equation yet, but he is going to be, fully healthy at one point, and we'll see where it gets him and where he starts off in AAA. We'll probably see him come back for the first time in a while in spring games, so we'll see where that goes from. But, there are a few spots left. There's not many. There's like one or two for the bullpen and for the bench. We'll see how they configure that. But we will see what happens with Beatty. If Beatty were to get moved, if they were to move on for Beatty, I do see that happening at the trade deadline and not during the middle of the season. Not in any way. M Easy saying, I remember Met fans complaining because the Mets at first weren't willing to give Marte a fourth year. I can't listen to them complain about Marte's contract now. I wasn't one of them. I was not one of them at all. Day one, I said that this contract was going to be a concern in the bottom half of it. It already was a concern in year two. So again, I have talked about this many times. And I was not one of those Mets fans who were complaining once he started getting hurt. This was from day one a concern from me. And this is coming from somebody who was a really big fan of Starling Marte, growing up watching the game when he came into the league in 2012. So we do have a game that is going to start up. So I'm obviously not going to, I'm obviously not going to go the full 2 hours as to where the game is going to start, but I will pop up the lineup for everyone in case you guys have not seen it yet. And we have Kodai Senga, who will pitch 1 inning for the Mets tonight, and then he's going to finish it off on the backfields. They're obviously taking it slow with him, which is the right thing to do, of course, with just beginning in spring training. But as for the rest of the lineup, some of the guys that we have mentioned as well, Lindor will be leading off for them. Soto, Alonso, Vientos. You have Tyrone Taylor in there. Luis Torrens Donovan Walton, like I said, out of minor league options, could be someone who makes them opening day roster. You never know. Chris Williams, who has been on a tear so far in spring training, gets to play with the first unit. And then Jose Azocar, who's also played fairly well as well so far in spring training. And then Kodai Senga, of course. And then there is this right here of the pitchers that could come after Kodai Senga. I don't know if David Peterson is pitching today. They said that he was going to start on the MLB app before this came out. Max Kranick, like we've said, we had a little bit of a segment on him. Tyler Zuber, who had an impressive debut with the Mets, who we acquired from the Rays in exchange for Paul Gervais, who was a pitching prospect, who was all over the place, who was very, very tall. Jose Budo will also get probably 1 or 2 innings out there, and then Huascar Brazovan as well will get a outing, who so far in spring has been fairly impressive. So as for some other comments in here, guys, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to hit the like button if you have not already. Sorry if this is a little bit shorter than our usual shows, but it's just me. I wasn't going to completely destroy my voice for 2 hours. I have to cut it off somewhat. But we will see how all of this pans out. And it looks like Kodai Senga started off his outing with a strikeout on a forkball in the lower part of the zone. So that is, the higher part of the zone. So we'll see how this starts off with Senga. Obviously, injury-riddled 2024, looking to get back, grab his footing, stay healthy. So that is the start of today's game. And that is where I think we are going to wrap things up. We talked about plenty of stuff here. For those of you watching, listening, thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's episode of the Mets Weekly Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. For those of you watching or listening on playback, you want to join the conversation in the future, make sure to subscribe to the Mets Weekly YouTube channel to turn on post notifications to not miss when we go live. And also for the all of our listeners as well, make sure to follow us on all your favorite listening platforms to not miss the audio version of episodes that go up at 9 a.m. the following day that these are recorded. Make sure to give us a 5-star rating. That would be very, very nice of you. It would be greatly appreciated. Make sure to follow us on X and on TikTok. All of my co-hosts individually, Frank and Andrew, who are not here today. And I will direct you guys strictly to the Mets and the Marlins right now, which is going on in Port St. Lucie. So, guys, enjoy the game. Kodai Senga is on the mound for the time being in the first inning. So make sure you go ahead and enjoy that. And we will see you guys next time. And, of course, let's go Mets.